Thank you everyone who's joining us today for another Honest Conversations. This is put on by the Discoverability Network, a program of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. And today we're really excited because we will have our very own Louis De Palma, Vice President of Small to Medium-Sized Enterprises, talk about the roadmap to inclusion. Before we start, we're meeting in virtual space, but it is important that we acknowledge the debt that we owe to all the people whose lands, this was traditionally. That includes the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And this is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Our regional hubs and partners across Canada also gather on other territories, as are all our guests. So we want to acknowledge the contribution of the many Indigenous nations who've cared for these lands since time immemorial.
Thank you, Lisa, for the land acknowledgement, and welcome everybody to today's presentation. So today we're going to talk about the Discoverability Network. We're going to talk a little bit about accommodation. We're going to talk about inclusive interviewing. And really, all the discussion is all about how do we break down barriers to participation in the labor market for persons with disabilities. So what is the Discoverability Network all about? It's a program that connects businesses to job seekers with disability. It came together roughly 10 years ago, where a group of organizations that were involved in helping to promote inclusive work environments and breaking down barriers came together and decided that we should create a program or a website associated with that program that really spoke to a number of communities. First and foremost, the business community, also, the disability community, and other organizations that worked with persons with disabilities to improve their labor outcomes in the labor market. So what is the Discoverability Network all about? It has a job matching platform. Persons with disabilities come into the platform, they can upload their resumes. On the other side of the platform, companies and employers wishing to hire from the demographic can come into the platform and post their jobs. The algorithms in the platform will connect those resumes, will match the resumes to the job ads, and then it's up to the two groups to connect with each other and make decisions about forwarding applications to the job. And then obviously the employer will take a look at those applications and decide who would move forward to the interview process. There's also training. We have a lot of training packages that have been put together. We talk about disability and employment related issues in the training. We talk about disclosure. We talk about the AODA, and we talk about accommodations. There's a lot of tools that have been curated on the Discoverability website. It's discoverability.network that folks can go to, whether you're a person with a disability, whether you're an employment service provider, whether you're an employer, and you can get some of that information there that will really help you take a look at hiring from this demographic, take a look at what your current practices are, and maybe some of the things that you need to do to change to make those practices more barrier-free, because there's a lot of best practices information on that website. The last thing I should mention about the Discoverability Network, it's totally free. So you don't have to pay to put in your resume, you don't have to pay to post a job, and you don't have to pay for any of the training. So we really encourage folks to check out our website and take a look at what we do, because hopefully we can provide some services to you or your organization to help break down some of those barriers to inclusivity. So why is it important for us, to take a look at, the disability demographic? There's a lot of myths around hiring persons with disabilities. You can see on the slide that's currently up, of those businesses that have hired persons with disabilities, an extremely high percentage of them have indicated that, those hires have either met or exceeded expectations. So that's fantastic, So, as an employer myself, I'm always looking for people that can meet the expectations of the organization. And certainly, persons with disabilities don't disappoint, given the stat that you're seeing there on the slide deck. Now, what are some of the myths around, hiring persons with disabilities? One of them is, well, gee, they don't stay that long on the job, and therefore I need to go hire again and starting that recruiting process. Well, clearly that's not the case. The stats don't show that. Persons with disabilities have a higher retention rate than other folks and other demographics in the labor market, and that's extremely important for businesses, and particularly in certain industries. Years ago, I used to own a restaurant. Okay, so I used to be a restaurant owner, an entrepreneur. I got to tell you, the turnover rate in that industry is extremely high. So anytime I could hire someone that gave me those higher retention rates, I was extremely happy. Another myth is cost of accommodation. Oh, geez, accommodation costs are so high. Why should I take a look at this demographic as a potential pool of talent? Well, the facts of the matter are this, is that 60% of accommodations don't cost anything. And only 37% of employees with disabilities require some form of workplace accommodation. Why are we talking about this today? Well, today you've heard, there's a lot of companies out there, and I speak to businesses every day, and one of the main concerns right now is finding the right talent. I have driven by a lot of local entrepreneurs in my own community where their hours are cut back, where the number of days that they're actually open is less than they used to be because they just can't find the right talent at the right time. So it's extremely important that we all take a look at those areas and those demographics that maybe aren't as fully engaged in the labor market as they could be, and try and tap into that market to meet the business needs that we have, so that we can not only grow our business, but we can help our communities prosper and grow as well at the same time. When it comes to the key benefits, I talked a bit about the myths in the earlier slide. This slide really speaks to those benefits of inclusive hiring. And again, I told you earlier, it's a higher retention. Here's the stat, 72% higher retention rate. That's excellent. Productivity. So if you're looking for someone that's going to do a great job and provide excellent productivity for you, this is a demographic you should take a look at. You can see there 90% inclusive hiring. 86% of employees with disabilities rate average or better on attendance. Health and safety, 98% of employees with disabilities rate average or better on safety. And these are all documented stats. This is through research. So I'm thinking of myself, when I used to be an entrepreneur, I'm thinking, okay, so let me ask myself this question. There's a demographic out there that can give me higher retention rates, excellent productivity, great attendance, and excellent health and safety stats. First thing I'm going to say is, how do I tap into this labor pool? How do I do that? And that's what the Discoverability Network is all about. It helps employers and it helps individuals with disabilities connect, so they make those matches and hopefully lead to an employment outcome. So what are we going to focus on today? We're going to talk about 5 things. We're going to talk about the various steps to breaking down barriers and creating a more inclusive work environment in organizations. So the first thing is the first step is you have to ask the person. And why do we do that? It's important because disabilities are both seen and unseen. That's extremely important. We're going to talk about finding the talent with a difference. We're going to talk about the interview cycle and hiring for inclusivity. We're going to talk about how do you initiate the onboarding process, and we're going to talk a little bit about disclosure and accommodation. So first of all, let's talk about ask the person. Sometimes we worry that we don't use the right words. We worry that maybe we're not going to say the right thing. So one of the things that we do through the training at Discoverability is we provide that information, we provide the language, so that if there's any concerns about not using the right words or asking the right questions or asking them in the right way, we provide some support and advice for that. So the first thing that we like to share with folks is that we'd like to say that disability can be both visible and invisible. Invisible disability is an umbrella term that captures a spectrum of disabilities that are not immediately apparent, such as chronic pain, episodic disabilities, mental health, neurological conditions, visual or auditory impairments that may or may not require assistive devices. So it's extremely important that when you're greeting someone, you're meeting someone, always ask the person. Let's not make assumptions, because the disabilities are both visible and invisible. Just some stats, you can see them there on the slide. 1 in 5 Canadians identify as having a disability. 29% of Canadians have a visible disability, compared to 71% of Canadians that have an invisible disability. So when in doubt, ask. It's important. It's like we would do with anyone. You always ask the person. That's the best way to initiate that conversation. Now, when you're thinking of looking at your own processes and taking a look about breaking down maybe some barriers in your organizations, one of the things that we suggest is that take a look at how we think about disability. Okay, because there's different ways to take a look at this. You can take a look at it from the medical model, which identifies the person's disability as a health condition, or you can take a look at it as a social model, which takes a look at disability in a totally different way. It takes a look at disability as a mismatch between the interactions of people and the environment around them. And that environment around them includes spaces, places, things, or even attitudes. So it's extremely important that we just take a look at how we're looking at disability from maybe a different lens, because all of us, we're all born with certain abilities, and we continue to gain those abilities as we grow older. And those abilities can be affected by time, it can be affected by the environment, it can be affected by illness or accident. So, things change as we age. For instance, I'm going to take myself. Okay, so as I've gotten older, you know what? I'm not as spry as I used to be. I don't walk as fast as I used to be. I can't move as quickly as I used to be. Perhaps, someone may have a leg injury there, which may impede some mobility. I'm finding, that my fingers aren't as nimble as they used to be. I'm probably getting some arthritis in my fingers. I know for sure that my hearing and that my vision is not as sharp as it used to be. So what happens is, some of the things that weren't mismatched in and around my environment, as I'm growing older, I'm finding that I am experiencing these mismatches. And that's how, if we take a look at disability that way, it's about taking a look, how do we make some adjustments to allow for those mismatches to make sure that everyone can contribute to their maximum potential. And that's just, a way of rethinking disability. Okay, so next slide here is let's solve for these mismatches. How do you do that? You've all heard of the term accommodation. Now, accommodation means different things to different people. So what really is accommodation all about? It's all about taking a look at what's required in a work environment, taking a look at the abilities and the skill sets of the individuals and of the employees and potential employees, and removing those barriers, making the changes so everyone can make a maximum contribution. Isn't that what we want to do? That's exactly what we want to do, because that'll help our businesses grow and prosper. By focusing on those mismatches that I spoke about earlier, between people or your staff or potential employees and the environment, we can allow everyone to bring their skills and abilities into the workplace. So we need to take a look at our workplaces. Have we built some barriers unintentionally in the workplaces that we should be taking a look at? It might be a process. It might be some kind of physical attribute of our workplace that we should take a look at and adjust to make ourselves a more inclusive employer. So accommodations, let's talk a little bit about this, because when I talk to organizations, this always comes up. It always comes up. But what is accommodation? It's really, really expensive. I don't know how to do it. How about if I do it wrong? What happens if I don't get it right? So these are all questions, are very, very, very valid questions. So what are accommodations? Accommodations are really adjustments to the workplace for an individual with unique requirements because of characteristics that are protected under human rights law. Okay, so, it can include many things. It can include race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, marital status, and disability. So really the whole issue around an accommodation is we need to determine what is the need of the individual and how do we match that with the need of the organization. So again, people say to me, but this accommodation thing, it's pretty new, and I'm not familiar with it, and I would say, well, when do you think accommodation first started in the workplace? I think most people are already pretty good, and most companies, probably the majority of companies out there, are very, very good at accommodating because they do it as just part of their everyday process in the workplace. In fact, 95% of accommodations requests in the workplace come from people without disabilities. They're related to family matters or personal issues. So think about it. We're already accommodating the first time, and I can think years and years and years ago, because you can look probably at my face, I'm a fairly old guy, years ago when the first person came to me in one of the jobs I was in and said, listen, I can't come in tomorrow at 9 o'clock because I have to do something at the school with my child. Can I come in at 10:30? And when the answer was back, it was yes, there's an accommodation right there. So we've been accommodating for a long time. I think just recently we've become maybe more aware of the different types of accommodations in the workplace, but it is not something new. It really is all about that flexibility, that allowing people to have an adjustment in a process or a function in the workplace that really allows them to make a better contribution to what we're trying to achieve, within our communities and in our workspaces. Here's something. The cost of accommodation. Most people think, or many people think, that accommodation is very costly. The truth of the matter is this, that the single average one-time cost of accommodation is less than $500. Think about that for a minute, less than $500. I believe that the cost of onboarding anyone in the workplace is just about $500, just under $500. So the costs are very, very comparable. In addition, for every day, and this is what the stats show, for every dollar spent on accommodation, there's approximately a $28 return. So accommodations really do enhance productivity. There's no question about it. I can give you a quick example. In one of the jobs I was in, we were in an open space, and one of the individuals there, was having difficulty because there was a lot of noise. Okay, there's a lot of noise coming from different people because it was open desk concept, as many organizations have moved to in recent years. And so, they were having difficulty with their productivity. They were difficulty concentrating. They were having difficulty in even making presentations at the workspace. So, what did we do? Well, first thing was the individual came to me and said, listen, I need some help. This is the reason I'm having a problem with the extra noise. So, remember you heard me say, ask the person. So that's the first question. So what can we do? How can we help? What do you need to help you in the workplace with the extra noise? And they said to me, I'm trying to think, initially it wasn't what we settled on. It was, well, I need my own office. Well, we didn't have enough offices for everybody to have their own office because we were an open concept. But in the dialogue and in the discussion, we arrived at that what would be really good was noise canceling headsets. And that's what we did. So we provided a noise canceling headset. And I have to tell you, it really did the job. It worked great. The individual didn't have those issues anymore with the extra noise in the workplace, and certainly increased the productivity of that individual. You can also see on the slide there that a significant portions of companies, 25%, report a savings because of the effective accommodation that they put in the workplace, and it ranged anywhere from 20,000 to 100,000. So accommodation is not something that we should look at and say, oh, this is problematic, this is difficult. Accommodation is really all about trying to match an individual to their environment, to take away the mismatch. And at the end of the day, what happens? Good, solid productivity, and you have a good, solid employee in your workspace. So if you want to find diverse talent, you have to look in places that you might not traditionally use. That's really, really important. And that's one of the reasons why we created the Discoverability Network. As I indicated earlier, it is a job matching platform for candidates with a disability to confidentially connect to employers looking to hire people with disabilities. That confidentiality, that's extremely important, okay? Because if you put your resume in the Discoverability Network, it is put in there confidentially. And the only time that, you know, so that allows, actually, because it's confidential, the only jobs that would be pushed at you initially is those jobs where the company is looking to hire directly from that demographic. So it's a certainly confidential process for you as an individual with a disability. There are also disability specific organizations that you can look to and recruit through, such as A Spectrum, Special Asterna, Lime Connect, Career Edge, you know, CCRW, and other local service providers that can also be partners for you if you're an employer and you're looking to find that talent from the disability talent pool. Now, again, why is this important? You know, you've heard me talk about, you know, roughly 20% of the population are self-declared as having a disability. Well, when you take a look at what's happening demographically in our communities in Ontario and across the country, you know, we're not replenishing ourselves as a population. You know, our birth rates are somewhere in that 1.6, 1.7%. You know, just to stay even, you need to have about a 2.2, 2.1, 2.2 birth rate. So where is the net new talent coming from? The net new talent is coming through immigration. And we know that that can't meet all the needs of business. It can't meet all the needs of our community. So where's the other place that we can look at for talent? We look at those places that we don't traditionally look for talent. And certainly the disability talent pool is one of them. You know, when you're talking about 20%, roughly 20% of the population, it's an excellent pool to take a look at in terms of finding that talent. So again, I mentioned it earlier, find the talent, www.discoverability.network. This is our website. It not only will help you connect to talent, and if you're a person seeking a job, it'll help you connect to job ads that might match your skills and abilities. You know, you can sign in as a business, or you can sign in as a job seeker, and there's all kinds of resources there. And I have to point out the bright yellow button. I've been told that I have to do that. It's extremely important. Click on that bright yellow button, and that'll help you register into the platform. Now, this is an interesting slide, okay? No one has ever seen purple milk. Is that true? Is anyone disputing that we've never seen purple milk? And Lisa, if I can't see the chat, so maybe someone might say they have seen purple milk, so you'll have to let me know. Okay, so when you're recruiting, what's important is that you recruit for those skill sets that match what is required for the job. If you're not doing that, what we're saying is you're creating a purple cow. And a purple cow doesn't exist. So the analogy here is you're going to put a job ad out into, you know, the job into the communities, and you're looking for a recruit or a new employee that may not necessarily exist because you're asking for everything. You're asking for everything that really may not even meet the requirements of the position. It's an over requirements of the position that you're looking for. So what we suggest is this. Start by reviewing your job descriptions. Take out those unnecessary requirements or barriers, okay, that you don't really need to perform the job function. For instance, and I'll give you an example, and I've seen this many a time, entry-level position. And right below there, it says 5 years experience required. So if this is an entry-level position, how does someone gain 5 years of experience? We understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to get a good, solid person for that position. But those numbers of experience number of years of experience is not really indicative of the ability of an individual to the job for that entry-level position. And and I'm like everybody else. When I go and I hire for a new job, the first thing I do is I look at the old job ad. Now, if I'm not careful, if I'm in a hurry, I may just post that job ad. The difficulty is the last time someone reviewed that job ad may be 10 years ago. So it's going to be totally out of date. So it's really, really important. Let's take a good look at our job ads. Let's make sure that they're written properly. Let's make sure that we put the right requirements in there for the job that we're looking for so that we don't create that purple cow posting. Okay, that's the analogy with the purple cow. So those purple cow postings are those postings that are looking for overqualified candidates that don't really exist. Okay, the goal should be to find the right candidate for the right job, not necessarily the most qualified or the most experienced, just the right candidate for the right job. I got to tell you, when I was, applying for jobs in other years, there were many a job that I never applied for because I looked at the job ad and I thought, my goodness, I could never meet those requirements of that position. Now, were they really the necessary requirements of the position? Sometimes yes, but also sometimes no. So then, I obviously didn't apply, and maybe there was all kinds of other folks that didn't apply either. So the organization looking for that employee is missing out on a lot of talented individuals. So how do we take a look and become, how do we welcome more diverse candidates when we're recruiting? Again, I talked about the job posting. When you're confirming the interview, share that accommodations are available for that interview. Ask, is there an accommodation that's required? Use language that people will feel, comfortable in sharing, saying, maybe I do need a bit of an accommodation for the workplace for this interview. They shouldn't feel that if they ask for that accommodation, that somehow it's going to be, it puts them behind another candidate. It's really something that should be offered as a matter of course. Offer different ways to communicate if that's required. You could use phone, you could use email. Not everyone has a computer or is proficient with a computer. Provide a interview accommodation. Make sure it's clear that, we are an accommodating employee. And if you do need an accommodation during the interview process, we're happy to help you. Some of the common interview accommodations include, an accessible setting, maybe longer times for testing, letting applicants know that what the interview details are and what to expect. Some organizations provide questions in advance. Remember, we're always looking for the best candidate, not necessarily the best interviewee. So we need to create that environment that everyone can show their best. That's what really being an accommodating or creating an accommodating interview is all about. So when you're interviewing and assessing candidates, plan the interview. Decide in advance, what is it that you're trying to assess? What are the skills that your qualifications that you're looking for that actually match the job that you're hiring for? Instead of just creating a laundry list of skills that may not necessarily reflect what you need to do the job well. Plan for a structured interview so everyone is assessed in the same way and on the same skills. That's extremely important. That makes it extremely a process that everyone is assessed fairly. You can reduce bias in this way by looking at skills and abilities, and don't take a look at things that are not related to the job itself. Accessible interviews. So how do we create accessible interviews? A couple of thoughts here that I can share with you. Develop a list of questions. Based, again, how I keep going, based on the job description. That's why it's really important to have an updated job description. Try and take out any unintentional bias. We all have some biases, unintentional. Let's take a look, make sure we remove them. Make sure that your assessments and your questions are related, again, to the primary tasks of the job at hand and what you're hiring for. Select an accessible interview location. Consider a location with physical accessibility, transportation options, proper lighting, proper ambient noise. select an interview format. Again, I'm going to say this, I keep repeating myself because this is extremely important. Select an interview format based on the skills and abilities that you're seeking, okay? And if you're concerned about a person's ability to do the job, you can ask them to perform tasks. There's certain things that you can ask people to perform, and use the same approach for all interviewees, okay? Let's not do different things for different individuals during that interview process. Examples, this next slide really speaks to some of the examples, perhaps, of some interview questions that might be biased. So, when you're writing your interview questions, it's much more difficult than it seems. Like it can be really hard. I've written them, and sometimes, it takes me a number of hours, sometimes more than a day, to actually come up with the proper questions and to again, actually try to better understand the abilities of the interviewee, so I can see if they're nicely matched for the job that I'm hiring for. Okay, so you can take a look at things like, if you're looking about like physical aptitude, there's certain ways to ask that. For instance, but rather than saying, can you handle this job because it has all these physical things, but probably better to say, how would you perform such a task, or how would you perform this task? Kind of stay away from a list of past accomplishments, that people are proud of. Stay away from, why do you want this job, for instance? It's better to take a look at and try and assess the abilities of the individual and try and match them to the job that it is that you're hiring for. I know I'm being repetitive here, but that's extremely important when you're trying to break down some of the unintended barriers in the interview process. So the next slide speaks to common interview accommodations. So these can include many, many things. They can include an accessible setting. I've mentioned earlier, longer times for testing. You can let applicants know, again, those interview details. Another good way to kind of in the interview process to make sure that you have a more diverse range of assessments is have a panel. Have an interview panel. Don't have just more than one. If you can have an interview panel, that would be great. It does reduce some of that unintentional bias. Be open to candidates with a disability, perhaps bringing a support person to the interview. During the interview, ask for information in a way that doesn't intentionally work against anyone. The question should be something that people can answer in a way to the best of their ability. Score those answers consistently, use an interview guide, and take notes to refer to them later, so you can have a good solid assessment after that interview. Now, on the onboarding process, there are some requirements. When we take a look at the AODA, and I just speak to this very, very, very briefly, it's extremely important that when you're onloading people in accordance with the regulations under the AODA, that you outline that you are an accommodating employer, and that you have an onboarding package that speaks to that. It talks about the things that you can offer because of the accommodating employer that you are. If people that way, any individual that you hire that needs an accommodation, they know that they can go to someone in their organization. Who should they go to? How should they ask for that accommodation so that they can get that accommodation? And again, it's good for both your new employee and the organization, because again, as I said earlier, accommodation really does help productivity. And I can give you an example. So, and this I learned at a presentation I did probably a couple of years ago, where I was talking to a group like you, and someone gave me this example, and I thought, I'm going to use this in other presentations. So, I'm just going to kind of, change the names, so to speak, so there's no disclosure here of anyone. So, I heard this story, so I'm going to relay the story to you. So this company was a welding company, a very good welding company, solid company, did a lot of exporting, got a lot of good business, and they had a top welder, and I'm going to say the person's name was Fred. And Fred was an excellent welder, and he was usually the top performer in the company when it comes to welding. Good output, excellent craftsmanship, very little defects. And what they noticed was at some point that Fred just wasn't as good as he used to be. Fred just, he was kind of, not doing such a great job. His output was low. He was making more mistakes. They had to change things. And, so people took a look and said, gee, what's wrong with Fred? Maybe we should talk to Fred, because his performance is really not up to par. Well, as they talked it over a bit, in the office, they said, why don't we just go ask Fred? Why don't we ask Fred and let's find out what's going on with Fred, because he's a great employee. We got to figure out what's going on here. So they did. They called Fred in, and Fred explained to them that, I hurt my back outside of the workplace, and I've been having trouble. I'm having a lot of pain, and it won't go away. I've tried to get attention. It's just, it seems like something that I'm going to have to live with. And this is why I can't do the job like I used to do at one time. So in the discussions, they came up with a way to accommodate Fred. And what they did is they found a special chair that they bought for Fred that was just about $450. Remember I talked earlier about that $500 single one-time accommodation average of $500? Well, this was right in that sweet spot. It's about $450. So Fred, got used to the chair, and lo and behold, Fred became their top welder again. So that's a great story. The story is great because the company was an accommodating company, an inclusive company. When they heard Fred's story, they took the steps to accommodate Fred, and Fred became, one of their top welders again. But the part of the story that, I'd like to speak to now is the fact that even though they were an accommodating company, they didn't talk about it enough. They didn't train their staff enough that they were an accommodating company. So Fred didn't feel comfortable coming to them initially. They had to talk to Fred when they thought there was a performance issue going on there. So I can't underscore the importance of making sure that when you're onboarding people, that one of the things that you do, you clearly define that you are an accommodating company, so that then, individuals that need that accommodation know who to go to and get that kind of support. Now, when it comes, I mentioned briefly the ODA that, telling new employees that, that you're an accommodating company and what the process is in the workplace is a requirement of that piece of legislation. I'm just going to speak a little bit to the employment standard, which also comes out of that piece of legislation. So that employment standard really is designed to make employment accessible to potential or current workers with a disability. Okay, so if you're an employer and you have under 50 employees, you need to address accessibility in your recruitment and hiring practices, workplace information, talent and performance management, and how you communicate your accessible policies, which I've explained just previously to this. If you have 50 or more employees, in addition to those 4 things that I just mentioned, you also need to have accommodation plans, return to work processes documented. And we also recommend that regardless of your size, that you document all your processes, because if you're an accommodating employer and you have a process, it's best to have a written process. So if someone says to you, can you tell me about your process? You can actually pull up your piece of paper or your e-version of that piece of paper, or a document that says, here's my process for accommodation. These are the things that we're doing. This is how we communicate. This is how we onboard people. It's highly recommended, whether you have 1 to 49 employees or 50 plus employees. We certainly recommend that you document all those things that you're doing in terms of your employment standard requirements. Now, accommodation plans. These are required under the legislation. And what are they? They're simply just written documents that lists the accommodation process. The legislation itself does not say and does not tell you how to come up with doesn't tell you what the accommodation should be. It tells you and speaks to a process that you undertake to arrive at an accommodation. So there's tools and there's best practices that you can get on the Discoverability website. One of the best ones that I've seen, I share this all the time, it comes from the Conference Board of Canada. They have a great toolkit that talks about how do you develop an accommodation plan, when do you review it, what is the entire process that you need to go through. That toolkit is on the Discoverability website. Okay, so some of the things that I'll just speak to in terms of the process, there's a lot of steps in there, but really important. First step is ask the employee. Ask them what it is that they need in terms of an accommodation. Let your employees know that you have accommodation policies. Make sure that employer requests on accommodation when you get one, gather information, assess, identify the needs, develop a formal accommodation plan with them. Make sure it's secure and make sure that it's confidential. And then also identify that there should be times when you should revisit that accommodation plan, whether the accommodation need of the individual has changed, or perhaps you've changed processes in the workplace, and therefore you may have to also take a look at that accommodation plan. You could even set a regular timeline to review it as well. So in addition to changes that may occur both on the employee or the employer's end, you may also want to take a look at it at a regular basis as well. So again, the legislation doesn't tell you what the accommodation should be, because accommodations are very individualized, but it does take you through a process that you should follow. Accommodation facts, I've spoken to some of these before. It's the costs are not as great as people believe. Typically, again, under $500 for a single one-time accommodation. I'll reiterate, 60% of accommodations cost absolutely nothing. 30%, 37% of workers with disabilities require an accommodation. Not everyone, with a disability requires an accommodation. But remember, when we're accommodating, okay, it's not that you're reducing the requirements of the position. Okay, accommodation really speaks to how do you enable someone to meet the requirements of the position in a different way. So a person still needs to do the essential functions of the job. That's extremely, that's part of the accommodation process. So it's not about reducing standards, it's about adjusting processes or providing some other support so that individual can do the essential functions of the job. Accommodations are changes or processes, as I said earlier, to the workplace so that an employee with a disability can do the job, or so that a candidate for a position can compete in the interview. Some of those changes, could be many things. It could be a process change. It could be a physical change. It could be maybe developing checklists to provide to remind individuals about certain tasks. It could include things like some additional tools. Some common accommodations that we've seen is, some screen readers, screen magnifiers, maybe perhaps ergonomic workstations, not unlike, the story I told about Fred. They could be, someone might need a brighter lamp, a quieter space, a desk that maybe adjusts in height. It really is it could be flexible work hours, it could be working remotely. There's all kinds of accommodations that can be developed, but it all comes down to matching the accommodation requirements of the individual with the obviously the business requirements of the organization. Okay, some very good tools. So there's many great tools out there to help you recruit, interview, and hire. I already spoke to the one that's, the Conference Board of Canada. I think it's a really an excellent tool. But I really direct you again to the Discoverability websites. There's many tools on there that will help you. Whether it's the Conference Board toolkit that I spoke about, Hired for Talent is also a great source of resources for small business to support hiring persons with disabilities. So take a look at those. You can access them through the website, and the website will also direct you to other tools from other organizations. When it comes to again, speaking to anyone, words are very powerful. So all I'd like to say with respect to this slide is this: avoid any negative words or words that have stigma associated with them. And you can see on the slide there, Don't use negative or disparaging words. Don't use some outdated words. Use words that really enable individuals to experience a disability, to feel welcomed in the workplace. I think that's really, really important, as we would with anybody, right? A welcoming environment, an environment that is inclusive, supports everybody in the workplace to work at an excellent level, and it creates good collaboration and it creates innovation. So, when we talk about inclusivity, it's so important on many levels, but I just want to talk a little bit about innovation and inclusivity. The facts are well known. The more inclusive an organization is, the more innovative it becomes. And the more innovative that an organization is, the better it is able to compete, not only in their local communities, their regional communities, nationally, and also internationally. For instance, if you got 10 people like me sitting around a table, and I'm providing advice and we're all providing advice, you're getting the same advice 10 times. So, we're only going to get to a certain level of innovation. But if we have a very inclusive and diverse group of people, 10 people sitting around a workplace, with lived experience in multiple areas, you're going to get a diversity of thought, which is going to lead to much higher innovation. And at the end of the day, a much higher functioning organization. Okay, so we've gone through a lot of information here, and I guess the last thought in terms of what I'm trying to say here today is, let's celebrate our successes. All of us are doing things that are really good. We got some great processes that we put in place in our various organizations. We've done some wonderful things. We've broken down barriers. We've become much more inclusive. It's extremely important that we celebrate those successes, because when you celebrate successes, we retain those candidates. Our employees, can share those best practices and successes within the organization, and it also extends to other organizations. So we really encourage that celebration of successes. And there's many ways to do that meet the requirements of your organization. It's a matter of maybe getting some people together and saying, listen, we've done some wonderful things here. How do we share them and how do we celebrate them? Very, very important. So if you're looking for the roadmap, if you're looking for more information about what I've provided today, because I'm just scratching the surface on this, go to discoverability.network and you can get our hiring roadmap. It's a 5-6 step process. You can do a deeper dive into that information to get additional information. If you want to access the Discoverability Network, to connect with qualified talent, again, go to the Discoverability Network, click on the proper button there, and you can look and post your jobs. If you're a job seeker, you can go in and you can post your resume. If you're looking for other resources, these last 3 slides, this one here, and the next one provides you all kinds of links to organizations that have a lot of information about hiring persons from this demographic, about breaking down barriers and helping folks become more inclusive in their organizations. So that's it for me. Lisa, are there any questions?
So we did have a comment that, somebody's taking it down, but basically we had somebody who was commenting that this is really, really valuable information that they've been looking for. And we're just wanting to tell you, Louis, that they thanked you for providing this information today and doing this webinar. We are going to open up the question and answer now. So you can put your questions into the chat, or Jeff can unmute you, depending on what you think. But I'm going to ask you a question. Louis, what do you think?
No, Lisa.
Yeah, sorry.
First the participants, and then the other thing I should tell all the participants is this. If you ask me a question that I don't know an answer to, I'm going to defer to Lisa, and Lisa is going to answer it. Okay, so you can't start. Okay. Well,
we're waiting for some people to put something in. So while we wait to see if there's any, I want to ask you, what do you think is the most challenging part of doing this, of becoming inclusive?
It's really building it into the I'm trying to think of the right word. It's really it shouldn't be a bolt-on, okay? You
So it's
can't
like part of your
become,
DNA.
yeah,
The
it's got to be
DNA
part of that's the word I was looking for. It's got to be part of your company or organization's DNA. You can't just bolt on inclusivity, okay? It doesn't work that way, okay? It's like building a house, right? You're going to develop the plans of the house right from the base. You're going to have a great foundation, and you're not going to think about later about that addition, because additions are really hard to put on and extremely expensive. So you got to think, because you know about change orders, right? You folks have heard about change orders.
Yes.
So if you're ever building anything, if you put in a change order, it costs an awful lot of money. So the advice that we give is build it into your DNA, build it into the culture of your organization, and then you'll reap the rewards, not only from a higher retention, higher profit, but also you have a much happier and successful employee group.
Yeah, I also think I completely agree that this should be part of your DNA. And I also think that the second piece around that should be that this is iterative, meaning you're not going to get it right completely the first time. And you might have to tweak, but if it's in the DNA and you've thought about it in your policies, you can adjust those as time goes on, or you learn something new, or a pandemic comes along. Would you agree with that, Louis?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example just today. Okay, just today. One of the folks that I work with said, "Can I talk to you later today?" I said, "Sure." I said, "When do you want to talk to me?" He says, "Well, why don't you call me? Because you're usually very busy." So I called him. Now, this fella has been with us for about 5 or 6 years. Okay, and he's going to be a new father. Okay, for the first time. So he said to me, "Listen, I'm going to need some help soon." I said, "What's the help that you need?" He says, "I'm going to have twins." I said, "Oh, wow." And he's going to have 2 girls. Okay. And he said to me, he said, "Listen," he said, I don't know when the day is going to be, but when that happens, I'm going to need about 4 weeks off. Okay. Can you help me? So what did I say? Absolutely. Absolutely, we can help you. I said, when you have, it's one thing to have one child, but when you have 2 children at the same time, there needs to be a lot of support in the home. And that's what he's thinking. He's thinking about the support that he needs to give to his spouse with the 2 twins that are coming through. So, of course. So that's just I guess, an example of an accommodation just today that I was asked. And how did we settle it? Absolutely. When you get closer to the date, let us know. But why don't we do this? Why don't you tell me all those things that you're working on that are critical, okay? And let's figure out how we're going to continue to do that while you're gone. And he says, well, that seems really good. And that's what we're doing. So he's going to tell us the critical things. And when the date comes up, which he doesn't know for sure, we can let him go right away so he can attend to those new family responsibilities. So just a quick example of an accommodation.
And I know for me, I work at the OCC as well on the Discoverability project. I know some of the accommodations I have might be actually just to kind of be offline. I'm working, but offline, maybe a half day every month where I'm not flooded with emails. And again, just to help you clear your mind, that can be a common accommodation, and you guys have been really welcome. So it's really just to help the employees stay productive.
Yeah, it's all about, really, when you think about it, it's having that flexibility built into the way we think, right? Now, there are some times you can't be flexible. Don't get me wrong. You can't accommodate for everything. It just doesn't happen. Okay, but the more you can be flexible, the more you can accommodate, you're going to have a more productive workforce, and you have a broader pool of talent to draw on. So
now it's true, and that's why I didn't get my office. Louis, are there any benefits from the government by hiring people with disabilities? That's a question that we have.
Yeah, there's something coming out soon. I understand that there's a new program that it's either out. I think it's out right now, which does provide some funding to organizations to adjust some physical space with respect to accommodation from a fiscal standpoint. There are other programs out there that are operated through some service providers where there is some training dollars that's available. If you hire a person with a disability, there's some training dollars that you can access for that onboarding process that I spoke about earlier. Okay, so there
And
is
even
some
the DAN
support.
team has some. So if you're an employer on the call, reach out to Lisa Kelly at occ.ca and we'll have a chat about what we can do to support you being an inclusive employer as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's it for questions. So I'm going to take this opportunity to thank our translators, Cynthia and Dean. And Louis, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
And Lisa, thank you for asking me. I haven't done this in a long time. I thought I was going to be a little rusty. Hopefully I wasn't too rusty for you, because it's been a year or so since I've been asked to do this. And the reason why I don't do them anymore is because Lisa and her team do all the webinars and the training, and they do such an excellent job. It allows me to do other things. So I thank you and your team, Lisa, for this. And again, thank you to all the participants today. Hopefully you got some good information from it. And please visit the website, discoverability.network, all kinds of great information for you. Okay.
Thank you. And one last person asked, do we get copies of the presentation? Yes, you do. The recorded session will be made available on our YouTube channel. But if you wish to receive a copy of the presentation, please, I noticed this is the name of the person who put this in is anonymous attendee. I will need your email address to be able to forward it to you. So if you can email that to jefflaw@occ.ca, I can make sure that we add you to our list to make sure you get a copy. The copy of the deck will be sent out this afternoon.
And Lisa, do we have a newsletter that people can sign up for as well?
We do, actually. So if you are a business or if you are a person with a disability and you sign up on our system, you have the option to receive, if you're a job seeker, it's a monthly newsletter. For businesses, it's quarterly, where we talk about some of the better tools or seminars that are coming up, networking events, hiring events, what employers are looking, new employers on the system. So you can also email me. Jeff, if I can get you to put into the chat all the contact, Elizabeth's contact, and Elizabeth will get back to you, or Jeff, and we can add you to the newsletter. We also have these sessions every Thursday, and you sign up through Eventbrite. So we hope you'll join. Keep an eye on that. And then we hope within the month to have some changes on our website to let you know about when upcoming events are happening. So reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Ask the person, ask Dan. And again, thank you, Louis.
Thank you so much. Thanks, folks. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.